Hi guys, happy Saturday. So this is the after show to the main TAUKIRWO show. So the main TAUKIRWO show, as you have already seen, is a show that is a collaboration between Tonyamoto Moyo and Oge Media. So usually I show up or from Tonyamoto Moyo, and then Kathy K and Kimaniwa Emma from Oge Media, they show up, and what we do is we have a conversation about our discussion topic. So our discussion topic is usually related to biology and health, and it is usually related to the biological cells that make up living things and the microbes that infect them. So typically what we'll do is we pick a topic that you guys have suggested. In fact, if you go onto the Tunyamoto Moyo page, there's a pinned comment that has it's titled questions, and then you'll see all the questions that people have asked. So what we do is we pick a question from there, and then that's what we do the show on. And so that's what you've already watched today, because this should be, I think right now it's probably around 5 p.m. ish, because our show is usually at 4 p.m. on Saturday. And so on that show, it's usually a combination of English, Kiswahili, and Kikuyu. And then now this one is only English. And then on Thursday, it's usually like 90% Kikuyu. Okay, so let's jump in. So what we talked about today was about fibroids. And we've said here, our talk structure is usually neke na neke. So what and why. So if we jump into what exactly are fibroids. So fibroids are common growths of the uterus. They're usually non-cancerous. What you're looking at right now is the structure of the uterus, like the standard representative structure. And those purple kind of balls are the ones that are supposed to represent these growths. And approximately 40 to 80% of women will deal with fibroids at some point in their childbearing years. So anyway, so this is kind of what they look like, and they are categorized in different kind of forms. There's 3 different types. There is the intramural, and so this means it grows within the muscular uterine wall. There is this submucosal fibroid, and this one bulges into the uterine cavity. And then the third major type, it's called subserosal, and this one projects now outside of the uterus. And then some other terms that you're seeing on that picture are pedunculated, and that one, it means it's hanging, so it's not attached anywhere specifically except for via this little hanging piece of tissue. So I believe that is what now is called the pedunculus, and that's why it's called pedunculated. And then there where it says fundal subserosal, that's to say, I think it's in the location is in the fundus or fundal area, and that's the gap between the top of the uterus and then the pelvic bone. I believe that's what that is to describe. So those are the different types of fibroids that exist. So now we talk about some of the symptoms. How do you know that you have a fibroid? So for most women, actually, they don't know that they have a fibroid because many people just don't have symptoms, actually. However, there are many women that do have symptoms. And so some of those symptoms are usually informed by the location and then the size and then the number of fibroids. And so some of the symptoms include heavy menstrual bleeding or painful periods, longer or more frequent periods, pelvic pressure or pain, frequent urination or trouble urinating, a growing stomach area, constipation, or pain in the stomach area or lower back, or even just pain during sex. So these symptoms, individually or together, can usually tell you that you might have fibroids, or your partner might have fibroids, or someone around you, if they're complaining about these symptoms, that might be something that they're dealing with. So here on this channel, we are very interested in the why. So when we talk about why this is happening, so some of the ways that doctors think about this topic, I should start by saying there's no one cause. Unfortunately for you, there's no one cause. But there are different things that doctors think about when they think about fibroids. So one of them has to do with gene changes. So if you've been here on the channel, you're familiar with this idea that we usually talk about genes, and genes are DNA instructions in the DNA of every living cell. And these instructions are the ones that tell the cell what to do. So sometimes there are changes in those instructions, and they can cause different issues and different problems. So many fibroids will often contain changes in genes that are different from the typical muscle cell in the uterus. Another cause might be hormones. So there are 2 hormones, one of which is called estrogen, and then the other one is called progesterone. You've heard of these hormones a lot because the menstrual cycle in you've heard of the menstrual cycle probably in women, is usually kind of coordinated and organized by the amount of these two hormones. And so typically what happens is that the amount of these two hormones kind of coordinates the uterus to generate this lining that thickens in preparation for implantation and or to prepare for pregnancy, I think is how we can say it. And so these hormones are also related to fibroid growth. And the relationship is specifically that there are some cells that are inside the fibroid structures that actually bind the hormones better. And so that suggests that something about those cells prefers or likes these two hormones. So there's a relationship between the amount of these hormones and these fibroid structures. Some other causes are growth factors. So there in the body, there are these substances that help the body to maintain tissue. And so some of these substances include these like insulin, like growth factors, etc. That's what I'm saying that one because that's what's listed on the list. But there's a host of different chemicals that the body makes, and what they do is they serve as signals and instructions for tissue to be maintained. And so there have been some of these factors that have been related to fibroids. Another one of these factors is called the extracellular matrix. And so this material is actually, so as the name suggests, it's usually outside the cell. And what it does is it helps for different cells to stick together. And so apparently, and I think the description talks about an example, it makes a correlation to bricks, kind of like the mortar or the cement that's between bricks. So this extracellular matrix material, it's actually increased in fibroids, and that actually changes the structure of the cells that make up the fibroid. And the idea is that apparently this is what kind of makes it this big mass. Also, this material, it stores these different growth factors that that are thought to be related to fibroids. And then the very last kind of cause is, or not, I don't think these are really causes, these are mostly like explanations and potentials, because again, there's no singular cause. So another explanation has to do with this idea that there's a specific type of stem cell that kind of goes crazy in the uterus. So let's back up. A stem cell is a type of cell that I want you to think of it kind of like a blank sheet of paper. And what happens is that that piece of paper, what's written on it, or the type of cell that this stem cell becomes, that's usually dependent on the environment and the chemical signals around it. And so in many different parts of the body, these stem cells exist, and their job is to help to regenerate or to make specialized cells depending on where in the body you are. And so the uterus is no different. And so the idea is that now this specific subfamily of cells, sometimes those ones can have problems in their instructions, and then they grow without order or without structure. And so there's this idea that that population of cells might be related to these fibroid structures. And so again, the idea being that the instructions that organize this cell, those ones, they go crazy, and then the single cell just divides over and over and over. And that's what becomes the mass that we see as a fibroid. And that mass is very different from the next door tissue. So those are kind of some of the ways that doctors and scientists think about fibroids. So there are some frequently asked questions. So some of them include, can you cause them? No, you can't really do anything to cause them, because again, remember, there is no singular cause. There's been some relation to diet and lifestyle choices, but the thing is, you can eat really, really well, and you can exercise and have the best lifestyle and still get fibroids. So I think there are some factors that can help minimize them, but in terms of, is there one thing that you can do to cause them? The answer is no. The next frequently asked question is, if I get pregnant, will they disappear? So the thing is, some women's fibroids have grown or become bigger during pregnancy, and others have become smaller. And so these factors, they depend on how big they were when you got pregnant. It depends on which specific factor caused your fibroids in the first place. Because if you think about the example that we gave about hormone changes, pregnancy comes with a lot of hormone changes, right? And so if the problem was initially caused by hormones, then that same problem will be perpetuated, throughout the pregnancy. And then inverse, if there are certain, whatever the circumstances are, if they change during pregnancy, that might lead to a decrease in size. So I think there's a large number of women whose fibroids do shrink during pregnancy, but that's not a guarantee, because again, it depends on what caused the fibroid in the first place. And so long story short, sometimes they will become smaller, sometimes they will become bigger. So it just depends. But it's rare that they will disappear altogether, specifically during pregnancy. So another frequently asked question is, how do you get rid of them? Typically, most women just live with them and they don't necessarily get treatment. What usually determines whether you get treatment or not is dependent on how many problems they bring to your life. And then depending on how big they are or where they are, they might impact your fertility journey. So these are some of the things that can impact you, but it's dependent on, like I said, all of these factors: how big they are, what they were caused by, what you're doing with your life, all of these things. Last question people will ask about is treatment. Are there treatments? So some treatments can include certain hormones. So remember, there's a type of one of the causes, or one of the explanations, is usually this hormone kind of dance and hormone imbalance and instability. So some treatments can be now certain hormones. There's a surgery that blocks blood flow to the fibroids one by one. There are some surgeries where the fibroids are removed directly. And then the most extreme example is removal of the uterus altogether. But the decision which method to use versus the other, that is made by the doctor and the patient, depending on the circumstances and depending on their goals. And so I urge you to find if you're dealing with this problem, or if you know someone who is dealing with it, I urge you to have conversations with a trusted caregiver and understand that you have different options and different ways that you can come to a solution, depending on, number one, how it impacts your life and what your goals are. So I hope that you learned something today. I will see you on